So, welcome to the third of our Town Hall talks. My name is Simon Glendenning, and I'm the chair of the Carrick History Society, for those who don't know. Forgive me for not standing up. I am absolutely exhausted today, and my brain isn't working, so something needs to give slightly here. So, last time we were talking about the weaving industry and its decline, and we realised that that was going to be quite a big topic, so we split that original talk into two, and now it's the time of the boot industry that we shall talk about. So here's a picture of tackety boots from South Ayrshire Council's collection. So these are looked after by the council in their collections department, and they very kindly photographed these for me. These are possibly the only boots I know of that actually still have the hobnails or tackets on the soles. We have a set of boots that are currently on display in the library, but they don't have the tackets on them. They've had the sole replaced because you can't walk about the street with these things on because you will start to erode the metal. But some people in the town like to tell me the stories of creating sparks from these boots and using them to slide down icy slopes in the wintertime. So this is the tackety boots. Now, I won't actually explain much about these at the moment. We'll do that towards the end, and I have a very special way of doing that, which I've managed to cobble together, pardon the pun. So we're going to go back to the weaving industry slightly. Why is this not working? Was that me that did that? I'm just going to go back because I don't know if that's my... Right, there we go. Right, so to go briefly back to the weaving industry. So weaving was a very prolific industry in Maybole, and the old statistical account of 1792 says that the people out with the town just would not believe the sheer volume of products that they were making. And it certainly left its mark in the town even today, because someone quite rightly pointed out that image that was up on the screen a moment ago. What's it called? The Cairder's Burn. And why is it called the Cairder's Burn? Yes, well remembered, or well known. The next picture.
Sorry, why was it called Cairder's Burn?
Carding or carding is a process in spinning wool. So when you have scoured a sheep's fleece and dried it, you need to make sure that all the staple length is pointing in the same direction, and so you use carding paddles, which are basically a block with a handle and lots of teeth on them, and you run it over each other, sort of like a dog's coat brush. And what that does is it makes all the strands of wool line up so that you can then spin it, because you pull it apart slightly just till the strands break away from each other, but they twist together and hold themselves, and then you get a very long continuous piece of wool eventually. But the carding process requires water, or it did require water, because in those days they would scour the wool and card it at the same time in the Cairder's Burn. So that's why it's called the Cairder's Burn. Its actual name is the Abbey Mill Burn, because it is the water's fed from Morecambe Loch, which passes by Crossraguel Abbey, and they had a mill there. So, wee bit of information for anyone know where this street is, if you know Maybole? Yes, the Weaver's Vennel. So this is a row of weavers' houses. It's no longer there anymore, and when I go to the Ayrshire Archive, I like to read the old Town Council minutes, and I happened upon an entry, I think it was the 50s, possibly, I can't remember the exact date, but they were sending letters to the residents of Weaver's Vennel because they had decided that as a council, the name should be changed, because there's no weaving in the town anymore. There's no weaving cottages, so we don't need this old-fashioned name anymore. So we want you, as the people living in this street, to decide the new name. There were 5 different choices, and they landed on Ladywell Road I think. That's Ladywell Road now, isn't it? Yes. I keep getting them mixed, Ladywell and Ladyland Road mixed up. So they chose Ladywell Road, and that would not happen today because you are not allowed to do that, because if you go around cities and towns and you'll see Weaver's Venel or Coral Glen, for example, that's off the word quarry because there was a stone quarry there. So these tell you a little bit of history of the area. So let's change it back. So, before the decline of the weaving industry, there was evidence of another industry starting to take hold in the town. A court case in 1800 lists a man's occupation as a shoemaker. And there were a lot of shoemakers making shoes by hand sewing around the time of the decline of the weaving industry. And one man called John Gray is called the pioneer of the boot industry, came into the town and decided that he would repurpose these unemployed weavers and turn them into bootmakers or shoemakers, because they're used to working with textiles, used to doing sewing. They could easily, change their trade. So he employed many previous weavers to make hand-sewn footwear. Despite the advances in weaving, because they had a power loom after the Industrial Revolution, the same technology didn't quite catch up with the shoe trade until 1853, when you had this. So has anyone heard of Thomas Crick? It's actually a shoe company that still exists today. Well, Thomas Crick is apparently the man who invented this machine, which is the riveting machine. And that is a very difficult phrase to write in an article. Hello, come in. So I've actually written an article on the boot and shoe industry, and this talk has been pulled from that. So in that article, I had to write Thomas Crick's riveting machine, but it makes it sound like it's a very good machine. It's a very exciting machine. So this machine was actually put on display in 1851 at the Great Exhibition, and I know that that is the case because it's listed in one of the catalogues. And just as an aside, the Reverend Roderick Lawson, whose bust is on the staircase as you go down the stairs in this very town hall, he was actually at the Great Exhibition. I'm not sure if I mentioned that at the last talk, but I always find that fascinating that one of our well-known historians was actually at the Great Exhibition. I wish I was, because I love that thing. So, Thomas Crick's riveting machine is taken on by by John Gray's factory, and they start to produce the boots and shoes in a far higher quantities, and this is where Maybole's boot and shoe industry begins. So John Gray built his own tannery. There we go. So that's the Ladywell tannery. So that he was able to process the raw material from start to basically leather that you could work with to create a product. Around the same time, there's actually an abattoir next door to this factory, which I've managed to trace on the maps from the different periods. So the cattle would come into the town, would be processed in the abattoir, and then the skin would then be processed in this tannery. Isn't that interesting? They were going from the very raw product to the end product. So another pioneer of the industry, and this is not working. Sorry. There we go. There. So another pioneer of the boot and shoe industry was Charles Crawford. He was already a shoemaker in 1837, and he built this factory alongside his nephews, Robert Crawford and James Ramsay. And I heard people saying Ramsay there, I was just... So Robert Crawford worked alongside his family at the St Cuthbert's factory for 20 years, and after he had been there for 20 years, he decided that he would build his own factory, the Kirkwine factory, on the site of John Gray's first factory. And I'm only going to press that button once, so there we go. So this is John Gray's factory here, and you can, if you know Maybole at all, and you can see the castle at the top there, so you can place where this actually was. And I was trying to see if this street here was still there. I'm not sure. I would need to overlay a map on it just to double check. So another person involved in the boot and shoe industry was a man called Thomas Aitken Gray, and he's got an interesting story behind him, which I'll read separately later on. He arrived in Maybole in 1860 and worked for his uncles at John Gray and Company's factory, who purchased the Lorne Tannery in 1875. There we go. That's the Lorne Tannery. So you can see that there's all these factories are starting to be built, and more are appearing in the town. All of them had big chimneys. They had 2 tanneries at one time, so you can imagine the smell. There would be smoke. If anyone knows what a tannery is, they use ammonia-based liquids and bark and so on. I will actually want to visit a tannery just to get first-hand experience of what it's like, but I haven't managed to yet. So you can imagine what the town was like. They don't seem to talk about that very much in letters and in you know, the first-hand accounts of what the town was like, but I imagine it wouldn't be very pleasant. Oh yeah, so all these factories are starting to appear, and we have this summary here. So this is in 1883. We have John Gray and Company, T.A. Gray, Charles Crawford, Robert Crawford, James Ramsay, and a couple of other sort of standalone factories. Now, the total number of employees in all of these factories was 1,184. And they were able to produce over 12,000 pairs of boots a week, which is incredible. I don't think I could imagine if there was, you know, if the same amount of factories were in the town today, making them like they did there. I just don't think they could do it. Obviously, they would be using modern technology and robots and stuff today, but I just can't believe that they were able to do that. So you'll notice there we've got Thomas Aitken Gray mentioned again, and I said I was going to tell you a story about him, so I shall do that just now because my notes are telling me to do that. So I've said that he worked for his uncles at John Gray and Company, and like Robert Crawford, Thomas Gray learnt how the business worked and decided that he wanted to join in the lucrative trade by purchasing the Lorne Tannery in 1875. So he expanded this factory so that it contained 95 tanning pits and added electric lighting to ensure that maximum production was gained during the winter months. Gray believed that the industry would flourish, and in order to reap the most benefit, he had to continuously expand the business. Extensive advertising was taken out by Gray in many newspapers, and on the surface it looked like Gray was every bit the successful Victorian businessman. But this excessive expansion that he believed was the right thing to do was about to be his undoing. So his continued expansion produced increasing debt, and on the 16th of April 1894, he decided he needed to take drastic action. So Gray boarded a train bound for London, and as the train approached Glasgow, he jumped from it as it passed over the Victoria Bridge. His body was found with 2 magazines in the pockets, one called Titbits and one called Today. Both of these magazines enabled travellers to claim insurance. They had insurance policies built into them. So one was for £100 in the money back then, and one was for £1,000. And from what I can tell, I believe it was customary for Victorians to travel with these sort of just in case, insurance policies, just in case there was an accident. So newspaper reports at the time reported that it was an accident and that he fell from the train. But we know from other sources and other people that have looked into this, and later on, that it was actually suicide deliberately to try and reclaim the money. In fact, I read the council minutes from the time as well. They don't even report it. I didn't think they would even mention it in the minutes, but they do, and they thank him for his time on the council and all the work that he put in. So what he was actually doing was trying to repay the debt after his death and make sure that his family had some money so that they could survive afterwards. And I need to do a bit more research to see if this was the right course of action to do or not. I'm a bit frightened to do it, actually. So that's Thomas Gray's story. So by the late 1800s, Maybole was very prosperous, and its name was known throughout the country and the empire, even as far away as Manitoba, where they had their own Maybole shoe shop. And it's telling me to change the slide. Yes, so this is prosperous Maybole. This was my... You can see some of the chimneys. I'm not entirely sure if this is... Yeah, this is about the 1800s, I think. This is from Crosshill... No, from Bologna or Ballony, or however you pronounce it. But it wasn't to last, unfortunately. And in 1907, it was the beginning of the end, because the Ladywell factory closed down, and this was described as a major tragedy in the press. And this left many people out of work, and the hard times of the declining weaving industry returned to Maybole. And there's a very famous picture. This is Maybole train station in the 1910s. This is what is described as the mass exodus of Maybole. It's been recorded that 2,000 people emigrated to Canada in this exodus because, there wasn't enough work to go around. They could take the skills that they had developed here over to Canada, where they had boot and shoe manufacturers as well, and that's just exactly what they did. And those people that did emigrate to Canada flourished as well, because there we have a picture from 1927, and this is called the first Maybole and District Picnic. This is in somewhere that I've stupidly not written the name down. Hamilton, I think, in Canada. So you can see how many people, they're all from Maybole. This is where, if you're doing your ancestry, it can be a bit complicated, because if you go back and you find a dead end in the 1910s, it's because, you know what I mean. So, yes, so there was a slight stubbornness in the Maybole people, as there always is, unfortunately, with certain things. They didn't want to progress from the hand working or the handmade stuff to using machines. And that's what caused that first factory to close down. But Crawford, Ramsay and Lee's factories were more far-sighted, and they installed machinery into their factories, and they absorbed the remaining workers that stayed in the town, because they had more, despite the fact that they had machines, it meant that they were outputting more, so they needed more people to actually pack everything, so there was sort of more jobs created for that. And then we get to 1914, and what happened in 1914? Yes. Terrible war, but not so terrible for this town, because if that hadn't happened, I reckon the boot and shoe industry would have disappeared far sooner. I read one document that said 95% of the entire British Army's boots were manufactured here. So you can imagine, we're getting a slight resurgence again, and that's on the back of a war, which is terrible. So then we get after the war, and we're in the interwar period. And that was unfortunately, the death knell for the industry, because a certain invention happened then. These are wellies, or Wellington boots. So during that period, in fact, the Duke, do you know why they're called Wellington boots? It is from the Duke of Wellington, but he had leather boots that were pretty watertight. And in the interwar period, they had invented a way for rubber to be moulded and shaped and glued and whatever to create these waterproof items of footwear. So a lot of the farmers decided that they were going to just get these because these were cheaper. And they didn't want to spend a fortune on these boots that had, were handmade, and they had all this high expensive leather, so they just went for them. Because you could just go, if they broke, you just buy another one. Whereas you'd have to send a pair of leather boots back to get them repaired, and so this is what they did. They also lost the Irish market because there was a high tariff introduced in the interwar period, so they couldn't sell in the Irish market. And by that point, there were only Lees and Company and McCrath and Company as the two big factories that were left. And then we come to another war, and that brought short-term full employment again. Not so much, there wasn't actually such a high volume of boots made during the Second World War. I think it was one particular division of the army that were given the exclusive contract from Maybole. And then a war's over. The war's over, and we're back to square one again. So some of the factories, or one in particular, Lees and Company, started to produce things other than boots. And I have here the original announcements of the opening of their new shop in Glasgow, which is essentially a department store. So they were creating dresses, jackets, hats, clothing for children, and it's all in this catalogue, which is slightly falling apart, but after the talk, you're more than welcome to come up and have a look through it. I only recently discovered that they did this. This was in a box of items that the Society had inherited from David Kilty, and it's just added, another facet to the story as well. So they decided to start producing other products, and they were the largest employers in the town until, and I'm hoping that's changed over, until there was a fire in 1962, I believe. And I always ask this, but please don't be offended. Does anyone remember that fire? Sorry. People describe the smell, and there's other photographs. I was trying to look for the photograph of it actually on fire, but I've got so many photographs, it was hard to find them. But this is obviously afterwards. But there's loads of photos of people standing watching the fire happening, and they're almost witnessing. Well, they're witnessing the end of the industry. There's a very good picture that's the absolute symbol of the end of the boot and shoe industry. But yeah, lots of people tell me the story about that fire. So, you'll have noticed I've deliberately omitted one very famous name to do with the boot and shoe industry in Maybole, and that is Dick Gowdy, who some of you will probably remember, actually. And I've deliberately not spoken about him because I want him to tell you about himself in his own words and his own voice. And don't worry, this isn't artificial intelligence or anything. So I'm about to play you a recording, an interview that he did, or just a small part of an interview that he did for West Sound. And he describes why the boots are shaped the particular way that they are, and basically explains more about his life in a better way than I can. So hopefully this works. Well, there's Dick Gowdy himself there. And he was the last bootmaker in Maybole, as he will explain himself. Where's that sound coming from? We need to switch this. Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, hopefully this works now. Just a sec. It will work. Come on. No, because that's not supposed to do that. I think it's. Sorry about this, everyone. I think it's trying to play the sound through something, and it is playing it from there, but it's not coming out the TV, possibly. So, in the meantime, I'll just talk to you about what I've got in front of me and the table here. So, after the talk's finished, you can come and have a look at these different things. So, the first thing is this is the Ayrshire Notes. Sort of, it's not a newsletter. It's a publication that the Archaeological Society produced, and I was asked to write an article about the boot and shoe industry. So it's in there. So it's where I've pulled the information from for the talk. And it is my plan in the future to write a larger publication about it because there's so much information out there. Oh.
Of the race of famous shoemakers from the town of Maybole in Ayrshire.
So that was a small part of a radio interview that Dick Gowdy gave. I think that was probably the late 80s, early 90s. I don't have the exact date. Thankfully, though, I am in touch. How do you know that?
Because I was the chief engineer at West End.
Oh, there you go. So that's just a short part of the recording, and it's on cassette tape, so I have to find a method of transferring the audio from a cassette tape to digitising it. And I've just realised I have audio engineers in the background, so I'll be asking them afterwards. But it's wonderful because it's better to hear it from the the person themselves. Unfortunately, he's passed away many years ago, but I'm in touch with his daughter, who's coming over next month, Mary, and she has other things that she can share with us as well. So we're going to build something quite special, I think, for everyone to learn a bit more about the boot and shoe industry from the very people that worked in it. So the next slide, this is the final slide, you'll be pleased to know. It's the one with the, oh, that'll get there, don't worry. Come on. Ignore that, sorry.
Last survivor.
Oh, forget it. It's because the thing's right up the back. It's a MacBook, which doesn't like any of this technology that we're plugging into it. I just have to be awkward, you see. So, after Dick Gowdy retired, he moved to Portugal, and there was absolutely nothing left of the boot and shoe industry. And today, there isn't anything left of the boot and shoe industry in the town. So, if anyone's wandered around Maybole, you'll have noticed some of these plaques on the left-hand side. These mark out the sites of previous factories or the tanneries or interesting parts related to it. It's going to need to be done up a little bit because a couple of them are not there anymore. There's at least one I know of that's not, the information's not quite right. But as I'm doing this talk through the Maybole Regeneration Project, Maybole Regeneration are going to renew this heritage trail as well, so it'll be a bit better. And a few years ago, we had Gowdy's restaurant opened that was named after Dick Gowdy, and inside there were, sort of hints of the boot and shoe industry in the past, some photographs and a pair of boots and lasts and so on. So that was something that was tried. The boot and shoe industry made a great impact in the town in 2002 when it was discovered that a block of flats that were built on the former site of the Lawn Tannery 50 years prior had, sorry, I've said that sentence wrong. The flats that were built on the site of the old tannery were starting to sink into the old tanning pits. It got quite a lot of press coverage at the time. Every single person in those flats had to be evacuated, and the ground is still empty to this day because I don't know why that happened in the first place, why they were allowed to build, but that was one of the impacts that happened because of the boot industry. So, as the Carrot History Society, we would like to try and make more of a thing of the boot and shoe industry by either having some sort of museum or permanent exhibition, or certainly going to help in this new trail that's happening, and on our website. There's lots of resources that we have been given over the past few months to do with the boot and shoe industry, and after the events that are coming up shortly, we'll have more time to be able to put them on the website and for all of you to look at as well. So that's the end of my brief talk. Apologies for generalising all the different sections of the boot and shoe industry, but you could do a complete talk on Dick Gowdy. You could do a complete talk on the Crawfords, on the boots themselves and how they were manufactured. So, and I hope I'm not giving the regeneration people any ideas by saying all that. So, but thank you for listening to the talk. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to try and answer them, if anyone has any. Yes?
So
The boots that are currently in the library just now, in the display case, I have been told were made by Dick Gowdy himself. S- uh-huh. Yes. Yes. That is the plan. We are looking for a premises to sort of our HQA type thing, but also so that we can do things like this. So if people had any, I was telling you the story about my mum has a cod bottle from the St Helens Work Factory, which was a lemonade factory around the time of the early boot and shoe factories. It's a bottle that has a marble in the neck, and the pressure from the gas pushes the marble to the top and so on. You still buy them in Japan. They still sell fizzy drinks in these bottles. I'm not allowed to have that bottle. She's not giving it to me until it's one of her prized possessions. I'll get it eventually, though. But you see, these things could come to to a place on a temporary basis for people to look at if they were safely locked away, etc. We could get stuff from the South Ayrshire Council collection on loan for an extended period, like those boots, because they're just sitting in a cupboard or in a box. They have to be in order to make, to last for many years to come. And I will say this, that particular department of South Ayrshire Council is exceptional, and I'm not paid to say that. That is my absolute opinion, because any of you could contact them and ask for a look around their collection. And you go around with some of their staff, and that's their job. They have to show you what's in there, and they're more than happy to show you all this. I love going to visit. I don't think they love when I visit, because I ask too many questions. But so that is the idea, yes. So we're currently looking at the former post office is one of the places we're looking at, but we've got plan B, C, and D, because you need to plan these things out properly so that you don't end up having a thing and then running out of money. And a lot of you guys are involved in things like this, so you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to stop talking now. Has anyone else got any more questions? Yes.
Was there a military connection with Maybole in that in the First World War, of all the places in the country, Maybole got the contract for 95% of the army boot?
It was simply because Maybole was the name in boot and shoemaking. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. I mean, Kilmarnock had a shoe factory, but they didn't do the hardware in boots, I don't think. I think they were more like your formal wear boots. I should also mention there's a catalogue here. It's called Good Boots for Country Wear from Maybole. This is the original. The council doesn't even have the original. They've got a photocopy of this one. And it shows you all the different boots that they made and the purposes that they were for. So you're more than welcome to have a look at that. That military connection that you mentioned, I do need to look into that more and see if there's anything. Do you mean like if there was a high up in the army and said, "Oh, give us the contract"?
Yeah, it just seems that from a small place, 95%.
Yeah.
Was that bootmaker in London or something?
No, but you're quite right to ask that. There's all the former factories' documents or almost all the former factories' documents are in the National Records in Edinburgh. And I have requested them all in one go at one time, which was a horrendous mistake because it's 2 trolleys full. And I thought it was just wee booklets. It's 2 trolleys worth of these documents. And I didn't have enough time that day, so I need to be very selective about what I look at. And again, I shall say, anyone's allowed to go and visit the records and look at all these things. It's free, and it's open to everyone. It's not just folk that are interested in it. So I recommend you give that a go, because you go down a rabbit hole sometimes. I don't like looking at old newspapers because I get very easily distracted. It's like, oh, there's an advert for soap. Oh, I know that soap today. So where's it? And then you go, yeah.
What about the Ayrshire Archive? Is it
Oh, yes.
open, and how often?
The Ayrshire Archive's only open on a Tuesday. There's morning appointments and afternoon appointments, or you can go in for the full day. They close at 1 for an hour for lunch. It's another great resource, and it requires more people to go and visit it so that the council can justify putting more staff in place and opening it for longer. And if the more people that visit, the council will be more inclined to want to do that. Again, wonderful department of the council, but that's the whole of Ayrshire that they cover, so that's all the Ayrshire councils. If you're interested in church stuff or school records, you go to the Dick Institute in Kilmarnock, but all the Maybole town minutes are in the Ayrshire archive, and they go back as far as the 1800s, and then if you want earlier ones, they're up in Edinburgh, and there's a section of them that have been lost. The very, very early ones have been lost. I hope they're just hiding in someone's basement or in someone's house, and they come forward and give them back, because even Mr. Gray that wrote the Maybole book, he didn't get access to them, and he says they're lost, so he just tries to make his best judgment when he talks about Maybole prior to 1700. But you never know. Yes.
My understanding is that the town hall burnt down in 1725 and the records were burnt. I understand that's what happened from Lodge record. The Lodge minutes for number 11 only go back to 1725 because they were lost.
Right. Because I wasn't sure even if they made copies of them for sending to, I don't know. Because I did notice that there's a version of the minutes they take, and if someone sends correspondence in, like a letter to say, I'm complaining about such and such, they will write it out word for word in one particular ledger, but in another ledger, say in the Ayrshire archive, they just reference the letter, but they don't tell you the content. So I don't know.
May not be true, but
No, it's possible. We shall wait and see. But yes, the Ayrshire archive's great, but you do need to ask them what you want to look at. So you could email them and say, oh, what have you got to do with Maybole? And they'll give you a list, and it will give you a code. So if you want to look at a specific item, you ask for that code. If you can go in and sit in the research room and look through the valuation rolls. You don't need to book them out. There's some local history books in there as well that you can sit and flick through. They've got an entire collection of one man's ships and steamship collection that was donated. That's in the foyer, so I sometimes go and spend some time reading through that because I like ships as well. So yeah, I definitely recommend visiting that.
Is that in Wellington Square, the council office?
No, it's at the harbour. So it's at, where, is it Ayr Grammar School it was or is now? It's, yeah, so the primary school playground's actually the roof of the Ayrshire archive, and it's quite noisy when it's break time. But the entrance faces out onto the river from there. So yeah, and it's all purpose built to keep all the documents safe and watertight and so on. So, but yeah, wonderful, and they're fantastic people that work there, so they will help you with any inquiry. Yes.
You said there was Shoemeat and also in Kilmarnock, but for South Ayrshire it was Maybole.
Yep.
I'd heard reference previously that there was also shoemaking in Griffin. So,
Well,
might not, or was it just to a lesser extent? Or?
there may well have been. There's certainly independent sort of people who may make them, but Girvan has a Maybole shoe shop. So that may be what you're thinking of. In the Maybole or the old Girvan picture book that you see, there's a shot down the high street, and there's a big massive advert for Maybole shoes at this shoe shop. There was a Maybole shoe shop in Rothesay as well, which I was quite delighted to find out because I love going over to Rothesay. And but the people there couldn't tell me where it was. Apparently there's a whole section of a square that was demolished, and there's now a co-op there, so all the numbering systems are all out of kilter. So, but I will need to do investigations there. So yeah, I know. Any more questions? No. So feel free to come and have a look at these documents, and if you want to, if you're ever passing by the library, do pop in there and see the display that we've made. And you'll see the boots that you'll see at last, and there's also a button hook for ladies' boots in there as well, which was sold at McQuiston's Ironmongery, which is across the road from the library. So interesting connection there as well. So yes, feel free. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.